Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or perhaps you just want to better understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to talk about the role of being an author versus the role of being a publisher. And
which of us gets to be the author and which of us gets to be the publisher?
That's a tough one. I guess we both get to be both is the reality of the situation, because
we both are both.
That is the importance of understanding those roles.
Let's start by talking about what is the role of the author. Why do you have an author?
An author exists to generate content. First, that's really the job. An author exists to understand who their audience is and why that audience is their audience. And the author exists to connect those dots, and that's maybe the most controversial one, where authors feel like it is not their responsibility to bring their book to their audience. But, hey, we're living in 2020. All bets are off.
What is the role of the publisher?
The role of the publisher is to bring the book to market, to reach that audience, to publicize, distribute, and
manufacture.
Yeah, protect the author's property as well from, bootleggers and the like. And, to really put it in all of the places that it can go, such as foreign translation, audiobook, digital book, paper book, hardcover, etc. And the number one, I would say it's far from my most controversial statement, but my probably most salacious statement is that 9 times out of 10 people assume that I started Microcosm because I wanted to publish my own writing, which is, I just nothing could be further from the truth. That was not how I really saw myself more as a publisher than I did as an author. But
you did eventually start publishing your own books and zines, and you're in fact very prolific. How does that play into your author-publisher relationship with yourself?
Right. I waited 12 years before I published myself, so for what that's worth. And that wasn't because I was waiting, it was more because I would rather separate those relationships. It seemed more prudent.
Why? Why should we separate these relationships?
Because, as I clarified to the answer to your first question, they're very different roles. The role of being an author is not the role of being a publisher, and vice versa. So if you try to morph them into one role, it's very difficult to have appropriate emotional distance between those roles. So, on one hand, the reason that most publishers don't publish their own staff is because those publishers know exactly what work goes on behind the scenes for their average book, and they know what does and does not go on behind the scenes for their own book. And there is, if not the public appearance of impropriety and nepotism, there is the reality of it, or there is, even worse, the fact of an in-house author not getting the amount of attention that, an out-of-house author does.
I think,
That's the, you normally hear about the other end of that story.
Yeah.
Where the author that can't have enough emotional distance from their book to sink all of the resources into it. That's normally the story you hear.
Yeah, I found that having publishing experience has really helped make me a better writer. Mm-hmm. And also a better author. I mean, when I wrote my first book, I was like such a difficult author.
I'll say.
You can attest to that. And just like didn't know what to expect, didn't understand what work had to happen. Every time I was asked to do something even writing was just like, it felt so difficult and I felt so close to it. And then once I had a lot of publishing experience, it was a lot easier to be like, oh, okay, this is what happens next. This is if I do one more editorial pass on my manuscript, then the book will be in the shape I want it to be. If I create a marketing plan now, then I can make sure that I tap into my publisher's publicity department. And just not having all the questions is probably helpful too. Yeah. And I don't think you have to have publishing experience to be an author, but like knowing as much as you can about how it works will help take a lot of the mystery out of it.
Yeah. And
the anxiety.
I think having publishing experience made me a worse writer, but a better author. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, I don't write to market per se, but I can figure out which of my ideas, I can figure out which of the things that I'm enthusiastic about and care about reshaping culture around are going to be heard and felt, whereas there was a time where I had a lot of bold ideas and they just don't people it's normally because the shelf is too crowded, but it's also just because it's as we learned, books about education are not as interesting, partly because there are so many of them, but also because every inexperienced person seems to think that their opinion about education is just as valid as people that have decades of experience.
Right, and so nobody's like, let me find this other person's idea because their opinion is already heard, and yeah. Right. And I do think that is kind of the... Yeah, it's sort of the danger of being an author, but it's also kind of the benefit of being an author is your job is to bring the passion for your subject, but also where you need to kind of let the publisher take charge is in the execution of that and also in the curation of that. Yeah. I hate to use that word curation, but there it is. And because it's you could be so passionate about your idea, but only 5 other people in your academic field might ever want to read it, which is fine. That's why academic publishing exists. But at the same time, if you want to create a book that will reach readers, a publisher can really do the work that makes that happen.
I would just like to point out that Ellie suggests that she understands why academic publishing exists. And now, moving on.
Why does it exist?
Because it
always has.
For all of the areas where there is no actual interest in the subject matter, but yet people want to write about it.
Well, this has been a hard diss on academic publishing.
But, it's not to say, if you want to make a book that is within your right, it's not that... It's just not being under any delusion that it will accidentally be discovered by people on the merit of the work or what have you. And before we fall down into that tar pit of dissing on such things, there's many great podcasts about people that majorly duped academic publishing, should you want to go down that rabbit hole.
That's fun.
Oh, yeah. But back to the topic at hand, I feel like my role as publisher is manifested, yesterday I got an email from an author that was, where their manuscript, it was the title, and then it was the subtitle that restated the title, and I was like, why don't we make a subtitle that fleshes it out a little better, tells the more people that care about this subject what your thing is about. And, and I got extreme pushback on that, which is fine, that happens. But, I feel like a lesser publisher or an author publisher wouldn't have the experience to know what that subtitle should say, or that, there's just absolutely no point to having a redundant subtitle to the title, versus I don't know that I've ever been the author that pushed back. I mean, I've definitely been
you've been the author that pushed back.
I mean, but not in that way, you know.
Well, you've never been like, no, it will be this way, or no, I hate that. I mean, you are. I mean, I honestly, like, it's good that authors push back, but it's also, like, we have a whole episode about this that we recorded with Dr. Faith about how important it is to treat it as, like, a joint project towards your shared goal, and to, like, workshop things and negotiate things and respect each other's areas of expertise.
Yeah, and the way I put it typically is that if an author treats a publisher like an ATM machine with book distribution, then the project has already failed. You know, like, you really need to treat it as a creative partnership, yes, where everybody brings expertise to the table. Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.